Well, good morning and welcome to this Integrated Skills webinar. We've been actually going a few minutes for those of you who've just joined us, but we want this morning to be a continuation of the chat that we've been having so far. We're talking today about what is, I think, maybe quite a plain sounding topic, but actually has generated an awful lot of interest, and the number of people who've signed up for the webinar and the number of you who've joined us shows me that actually the topic that we're covering today is of real interest. So the topic we're looking at is how to set up and run successful reuse shops at your waste sites. And joining us today, I've got two experts. They're both from Leeds. Well, that's debatable actually, but they're both resident, or at least related to Leeds, working in Leeds, related to Leeds. That will do. So I wanted to introduce myself firstly. My name's Stuart Henshaw. I'm the Business Development Director at Integrated Skills. A bit more about me in a second, but I wanted to introduce Liz Behrens from Leeds City Council. She's a Waste Services Manager. Hi, Liz.
Good morning, everybody.
And I wanted to introduce Louise Megson from Revive Leeds.
Hello.
Hi, Louise. Hiya. We'll be talking, we've got an hour together to actually talk through the whole issue of how to set this up. Firstly, I wanted to thank you for joining us. Just to tell you a little bit about the format. So I've got a little introduction piece just to tell you a little bit about the webinar series that we run, what we've been doing, how this webinar fits into that. And then I'll be handing over to Liz, who'll be talking about really from the authorities' point of view, how and why they set up the reuse shops and the sort of the mechanics, the process of how they did that. And then we'll be hearing from Louise, who's really kind of responsible for running the shops and talking about the I've been talking about this in terms of added value. Louise very kindly corrected me a week ago and says, look, this is social value we're talking about here. So Louise will be picking up and telling us about some of the social value aspects. And each authority has got a responsibility to fulfill the social value act. And so all of their projects need to really consider this. This is going to be a great webinar. I can already sense that this is a really good topic, and we're going to have some fun doing it. It's one I've been looking forward to because it kind of follows on so well from what we've been doing before. Let me just quickly drop into a few slides, which I'll just talk us through. A little bit about myself. In case you're wondering who this guy is, it's helpful just to introduce myself. So my background is working in waste. I've been working in the waste resources industry. So it's never quite become natural yet to call it the resources industry, and hopefully it will become much more easy to refer to it as the resources industry as we go along. I've worked 3 years in an environmental charity, 15 years managing local authority waste and environmental services, all of those glamorous things. 13 years since then in waste management consultancy, and I work for Integrated Skills, and our particular thing is route optimization and consultancy. So I've probably managed over 100 of those type of projects to my name. Importantly, my contact details, and increasingly importantly for all of us, our social media. So there's my LinkedIn contacts and Twitter. Please get in touch and let's join up. That's where I publish a lot of the information about upcoming webinars. A little bit about Integrated Skills, just to sort of fill you in on where we're coming from as a company. We're effectively a waste IT company, and we're interested, really, our main interest is really improving local authority services, particularly waste and environmental services, in two ways. One is improving performance, trying to get more out of the same resource, and in recent years, we've become more interested in helping authorities improve service quality. So mainly by improving transparency, so everyone can see what's planned, what's supposed to be done, did it get done, why didn't it get done, etc., etc. And there's a diagram for how this all fits together, which I won't go through now, but just to say that that's our background. And 18 months ago, we ran a national conference to which in a UK central location, to which only I think 25 people attended, just because of the restrictions of getting from different parts of the UK these days from a local authority point of view. So we started this webinar series. I was just looking back the other day at the topics that we've covered over the last 18 months, which are things like the government's resources strategy, a one-year review with Victoria Hutchins, engaging the public in recycling. That was Hubbub, who led that. We've run a masterclass on waste composition analysis, which was one of the other work areas that we do. We thought about the benefits of connected technology, so linking everything up from planning all the way through to delivery and back office, and including the customer services. We looked at overcoming resistance to new technology with Dr. Susie Hamlin, who's actually based in Leeds. This is a Leeds Fest. We also looked at local government service approaches with Paul Frith. And then we've had a couple of webinars which have kind of been driven by the COVID situation. So we had a briefing from Sarah Jane Widdowson on the type of things that local authorities ought to really be thinking about. The latest thinking on how to run waste services in the pandemic. And then we had Paul Jones from Northumberland, who joined us to actually talk about how they opened their waste and recycling site, which was really interesting and very well attended. So most recently we had Brian Main, who many of you might know, who writes on circular economy, and we were discussing what every waste manager should know about circular economy. And the whole thing about circular economy is that it's been on conference agendas for a number of years now. And my question to Brian was, okay, so what's the difference? What change has it made? And it was really fascinating to hear how actually circular economy is starting to impact. And particularly we looked at how it's impacted in Wales and how they've been changing policy at a very high level to include circular economy thinking. One of the interesting things that we picked up from the conversation with Brian was the role of waste managers in circular economy, and we went on to write an article which we published in a couple of places on this whole thing of the waste manager's role in circular economy. And as we were looking at that, there's a whole range of things that waste managers can do, but actually one of the important things that we concluded was who else in the local authority is going to start asking the awkward questions about what waste services are provided. So rather than the waste manager just being a kind of agnostic logistics expert, moving materials A, B, and C from point X to point Y, to become the sort of person who's saying, well, actually, should we be collecting this material? Is it in the overall environmental benefit to be moving this material? Should we even be collecting it? Are there better things that we should be doing with it? So this whole theme of environmental and waste managers being the people who ask the questions is interesting. I'll come back to that. Just a quick kind of getting us all up to speed. This is one of many waste hierarchy diagrams, and this is credit here to Sustainable Hackney for this one. So they've put right at the top the whole idea of rethinking and redesigning products, and then reducing our purchasing of products, changing our buying habits, and then we get to reuse, which I'm just sure we're all aware of, but just to make the point, is above recycling and certainly above disposal. And on the theme of waste hierarchies, I put this I call it vague. It is a waste hierarchy, but it's a piece of work by Sarah Lazarovich, who's an artist from Canada, and she's put together this hierarchy, and I think I like it because she calls it the bierarchy of needs, and so she actually talks about the book that I've got there, which is a bunch of pretty things I did not buy, is actually her book that she wrote, which includes a chapter on how she spent a year actually not buying any clothes, and actually got involved in make thrift, buying from charity shops, as we would call it, swapping, borrowing, and using what you have. So I thought it'd be quite fun actually just to ask you, Liz and Louise, how you might cope with that kind of challenge to not buy any new clothes for a year. Liz, how would you cope, you reckon?
I have been thinking about this for a while. Trying to reduce the amount of clothes that I buy. I do try to buy better quality, and a lot of my clothes maybe are 10 to 15 years old, some of them, and they last longer. And I do also buy second hand as well, which I think, kind of offsets, buying new. I think it will be quite a challenge to actually not buy a single item, I have to say. I think there would be, certain things that I might have to get, although try my best not to.
What about you, Louise?
I don't think I could do it, to be fair. I'm not a fashionista or anything, and I do have a wardrobe that has been with me for 10 years, and it's all one colour black in the main. Yeah, unfortunately, things do wear out, and I don't think I would able to easily replace everything with charity shop gear. However, I can't stop going through the rails when I go down to the shop. I absolutely adore it. It's just go through and just finding all these lovely things. So I am gaining to my wardrobe with all this additional stuff, and I am giving it back as well. So there is quite a lot of the swap going on, but I doubt if I could do a whole year.
Well, thanks for that. Just to say that I am actually both a user and a customer of the reuse shops in Leeds. Where we've bought some really nice things, and actually we use it quite a lot. So it's kind of it's a local interest as well as an interesting project for today. So enough of this chat. Let's get on to some of the meat of the conversation. Liz, I wonder if I could introduce you. You're the Waste Services Manager at Leeds. I wonder if you could give us some context. You tell us in your bio that you're crazy about waste. Were you always crazy about waste? Was waste management something you always wanted to do, or was it a plan or an accident, as we often ask?
Yeah, it was a complete accident. I started work at 19 for West Yorkshire County Council on the junior entrance scheme at the County Hall in Wakefield. After about 6 months, I was posted to waste management and land reclamation, and about 37 years later, here I still am in waste management. And it is an absolutely fascinating area, and there is just so many different strands to it that we could talk all day about all the different disciplines that are involved in the management of waste, and I've pretty much been involved in nearly all of them now in that time. And the latest things that we've done, sort of in the last 5 years, the reuse shops, just keep that bubbling, and
Brilliant.
keep it interesting.
Brilliant. Thank you. I wonder if I could ask you to just introduce us to the project. I mean, this is a great project, and it's kind of doing all the right things. Actually, Liz, before we do that, let's just engage with those people who are joining us today. And I wonder if I put up the following survey, whether you could actually help us. So what's the main reason that you actually have not opened a reuse shop at your authority? Be grateful if you could just tell us what is your main reason out of the 3 reasons we've shown so far. I'll just give you a second just to think about that, and then we'll see if we can't address those during the webinar session. Challenging question. I know there's all sorts of things going on, all sorts of considerations, but this is just a rough gives us a rough feel for which are the priority issues that we need to touch on. Liz, you in your bio you talked about when you start. I think was it when you started Leeds City Council were recycling something like 3%.
I think it was. I seem to remember a figure about 8%,
Right, okay.
and that was in around 1998, I think.
Yes.
Somewhere around the sort of 8-10%. We're now at 38%.
Yes, those days when we used to wonder whether 25% was actually, possible. Let's have a look at the results. I'm just going to close the.
This is very technical, Stuart.
I know.
Yeah.
No, I'm just waiting to see.
I can't even press the right button.
Okay, I'm gonna come back to that and show us it later. While Liz, you're speaking. So, Liz, I'll hand over to you. You're
Okay.
in control, and if you wouldn't mind just talking us through the project from your point of view, from the City Council's point of view, as the project sponsor.
Right. So that's a picture of the first reuse shop that we opened up at Seacroft, just to whet your appetite. Stuart's already introduced us, so I'll skip that one. What I was going to say here, and we've also touched on this as well, is you can probably tell from my accent that I'm a northern girl, but I can assure you that it's not all flat caps and whippets up here. And we do know a thing or two about the best places to grab a bargain. In fact, one of the best loved brands started life in Leeds, on Leeds City Market, which was obviously Marks and Spencer's. A little bit timely that with the job cuts they've announced this week, but anyway. So we thought, why don't we start our own success story and open a reuse shop at one of our household waste sites? And for myself and my manager at the time, just thinking about, introducing a bit of retail therapy into the job, I jumped at the chance. Just to give you some facts and figures there from Leeds. So in terms of our, sizes and authority, we handle last year just over 300,000 tonnes of domestic waste. So that's all the rubbish that we collect. All the services are in-house. And the recycling from the household waste sites, street litter, bulky waste collections, bottle banks, bring sites, etc. We're currently sending less than 2% to landfill because we're in the envious position that we've got an energy from waste facility. So all our general waste that can't be recycled goes there. So that is, we're already meeting the government targets there with that less than 2%, which is brilliant. In terms of our recycling rate, as I said, we're currently at 38%. And in terms of the reuse shops, they've provided us with around about 740 tonnes of reuse from those two shops, and that contributes some 0.63% to our overall recycling rate, which, as you can see, is quite small. And what we'll go on to talk about is one of the reasons behind wanting reuse is it wasn't so much for the recycling rate, it was for the social and community benefits that could also bring. So shop number one was originally conceived in around about 2005 while we were refurbishing the Seacroft household waste site. We've got some capital funding approved for that project, and as part of that, we put forward a proposal to build a purpose-built reuse shop within that programme. It was very delayed, however, although we'd got exec board approval in about 2005, the 8-9 credit crunch came and our capital funding was reviewed by the council, across the piece. And we didn't get the money back into the programme until 2009, which we then went out to tender and started the actual building of the site, and then the shop finally opened in 2011. So as you can see, there's quite a long time scale there, but to get that 1.5 million that we needed back into capital programme was quite a challenge at the time, but we did get there.
Liz, could I just ask you a question? Could I just ask
Yep,
you,
sure.
going back to the thinking? I mean, 2005 is quite a long time ago to actually have something like reuse prioritized in your strategy. So what was your what were your kind of influences on what was making you think about this as a potential project?
Yeah,
And you mentioned it's kind of the thing that some people are just thinking about now. So, you know, if we're talking 15 years ago, it was in your strategy. So tell us about your thoughts on that.
we just published our strategy in 2005, and it was a 2005 to 2035. So it's a, you know, a long strategy, and we'd already and that was the building blocks for the energy from waste plant that I talked about. That's what we were looking for there, to see waste as a resource. So in terms of an energy source, a renewable energy source, and also we wanted to see waste as a resource. And we knew that there were lots of things that were being thrown away on household waste sites that were reusable. And we had a very strong community sector in Leeds, who we were already working with at that time. They were already reusing, certain materials, and it stemmed, right back to there, and to the managers who were around at the time. We thought, this could be something, that is going to change how people shop, buy, and going right up to today, to the things that we're now trying to do, in terms of what you said about the hierarchy of needs, getting people to choose second hand, to not buy as much. So even way back then, we knew it was going to be a long road, and we're still on it now, all these years later. We thought that what we'd seen Warwick do, I make no bones about it, Warwickshire County Council were already running reuse shops back then. We saw what they were doing, and we thought, this is something that we could do too.
Could I ask you, well, I'm interrupting, I might as well interrupt again, about I've had 15 years working in local government, running waste services, and my kind of frustration at the time was the fact that elected members were maybe risk averse, and now I'm looking back on it and thinking, why on earth wouldn't you be risk averse if you were an elected member? There's kind of nothing but a potential disaster in something that you don't, is high risk. I'm being slightly sarcastic, but it's a high risk project. Why as an elected member would you say, yeah, we're going to put our hands up and take this financial risk? And the whole issue of whether it was actually going to technically work, whether you're going to find a partner who's going to run it, and all of these bits and pieces, these moving parts fitting together. So how did you get member support for it? And I'm sure that's one question that some of our listeners, attendees, will be kind of thinking about themselves. So if you could give any thoughts on how you did that back then.
Well, there's a range of things, really. I mean, our director at the time was very pro reuse. And we, as I said, we had a very strong reuse community sector in Leeds at that time. And members were obviously a link between the local authority and the third sector groups. So it wasn't too difficult a job to convince members who were in the Seacroft area of what benefits opening a shop there could bring. And we took them along the journey with us. So, probably jumping ahead to, I don't know whether I cover it or not, but we actually made a lot of visits to Warwick to look at their shops. We took the third sector groups that were active at that time along with us as well, to show them how it was being done, what the pitfalls were, what the benefits were. And we took members along as well. I think we took a couple of members at the time down. We literally got a minibus up, got interested people along, and took them on that journey with us, so that they understood and they could see, an actual shop operating, and why couldn't we do it. So once we'd done an option appraisal, of the pros and cons as to how it would operate and how we believed it would work. It was quite an easy job, really, convincing them that we weaved in, the construction of a shop into that capital programme.
Great, thank you. Sorry, I interrupted you, and hope you didn't lose your drift. But anyway, back into your thoughts.
That's fine. I think we're up to. Are we up to? Oh, hang on. I've got two laptops going here, and I keep pressing the wrong one. Once we'd obviously got the money back in the programme and the works contract, we'd gone out to tender and we knew that we were going to be building the shop, we had to sort of say to ourselves who would run the shop. And as I just mentioned, would it be Leeds running it? Would it be the private sector, or would it be the community sector? So we'd been to Warwick many times to see their reuse shops. And we knew that it could work for us, but we wanted, as they had, we wanted to use the community sector for lots of reasons, because of better public perception. It wouldn't be the council running the shop making money. The profits would go back into the local community. Unfortunately, our procurement team thought similar, and they also thought a little bit outside the box. So rather than seeing it as a public contract, we realised that we could offer the opportunity to operate the shop to the third sector, and we could close that, so we didn't have to operate it we didn't have to offer it to the private sector. It fitted in with Leeds' Best Council plan, in that we work within Leeds with the community sector, to deliver benefits for the local community, keeping the Leeds pound in Leeds. So once we produced that option appraisal of how we wanted it to operate, it meant that we could just use the third sector. And also, interestingly, and something which made it a lot easier for us, is that the procurement team also recommended that, because we were going to offer the use of the shop through a lease, it was not part of the procurement services, part of procurement of a service, and therefore not subject to EU procedure rules at the time, or the public contract regulations. So that meant that it just simplified everything. So we offered a lease, and within that lease we had some operational requirements. We didn't know whether the lease would be 3 or 5 years, so we did some market testing to look at that. We said that we would seek a rental payment through that lease, which is a standard thing which our asset management people do all the time. But also within that, we would ask for a share of the profits based on a percentage, which again was something that Warwick were also already doing. And we'd ring fence those profits for development of other reuse initiatives. We were very keen that the shop would be self-sustaining. Once we'd put that building up, we didn't want it to cost us anything. So we were very keen to make sure that whoever took it on had a very strong business case and business plan, that we could vet, etc. So once we'd got all that in place, an agreement as to how it was going to operate, we did some soft market testing. So at that stage, that little picture that you can see there is something that we had drawn up by the design team who were doing the works contract, because it wasn't built at the time. The shop wasn't even built when we started the soft market testing. We asked a number of interested parties to come together at an event, and we invited people from local charities and also other national charities that were operating in Leeds, and I think we had about 16 different organisations attended that. So we explained to them that what was on offer was a brick warehouse building the size of the building. It would have a drop-off area with a roller shutter door to the side, which made it easy for drop-offs and collections and so on. It'd have a shop window, a front door, and that we'd kit it out with toilets, obviously services and things like that. But any tenant that was going to take on the lease would be responsible for fitting it out inside, because we thought, well, we're not shopkeepers. We can't design this. Let's let the people that are going to operate it design it, because they're the ones who know the business and know what they're doing. So they would, install partition walls, shelving, whatever they felt that they needed. And at that point, we'd already decided that we'd put separate services on so that they would pay their own bills, and it would be totally, self-sufficient effectively. The soft market testing event was quite interesting, actually, because there was a lot of nervousness, particularly from the national charities. So, we had the likes of Sue Ryder, RSPCA, Salvation Army, some different groups. And because they didn't have a lot of experience of running a reuse shop on a household waste site, I think there was a lot of questions, going back to Stuart's question, is, it's a big risk. Is it viable? Is it going to work? And they weren't sure. But I think our local groups that, were part of the Leeds Furniture Recycling Network, I think they were more confident, that this could actually work. And quite a few of the groups came to the soft market event, but they actually pulled out. Some of the national ones, that they didn't actually put a bid in, for the lease at the end. We decided that we were going to contract out the lease out of the Landlord and Tenant Act as well, which was another safety net for the council, which meant that if after 5 years things weren't working, we could say, actually, this isn't working. We want our building back, and we're going to perhaps do something different with it. Maybe if we'd have needed it for an operational reason, or maybe just because it literally was losing money and wasn't working. That also caused a little bit of nervousness with the organisations that were potentially going to bid for the lease. But we were looking at 3 to 5, and we overcame that by saying, look, we'll offer you a lease for 5 years, and as long as it's working, we can extend that. And we have a constant dialogue, to make sure that things are working. We explained at the soft market event how we were going to select the tenant, and there'd be, a couple of stages to that. So a pre-qualification questionnaire to make sure that people who were going to apply for it were suitable, that they were geared up appropriately, that they had the right, decision-making structures in place within their organisations, and they had, the backing of their organisation. And that would then be followed by a lease application. So the PQQ is just a standard thing. Anybody from a local authority will know about that. So we're just looking at their organisation, confirming their experience and getting general information. I'll just skip actually onto the next one, because I think that's fairly self-explanatory, is the sort of pre-selection. The tenant selection, what we explained was that bids would be based on a 60-40 price quality split. So the rent that they were going to offer, and we gave them a baseline that we were looking for, of offers above, and that was based on a market value for warehousing, because it was quite difficult for our asset management people to work out what the market value, per square foot was for this, because it wasn't a high street shop, and it wasn't a warehouse either. It was something new, so we kind of pitched it somewhere in between there. And what we were really looking for, as I said before, is we were looking for the social benefits that these organisations could bring to Leeds in terms of volunteering, apprenticeships, working with the local community, offering jobs and employment. So the quality side of the bid along with the business plan that they'd need to submit for that, is something that we really did scrutinise, and that was another way that we mitigated, you know, the risk of this not working. We asked a lot of questions of the groups who submitted business plans, you know, to clarify, and some of them missed things out that we use some of our finance managers who are used to looking at these kind of things, you know, working with Excel sheets, numbers and all this sort of stuff. And one or two organisations that had missed some really straightforward things out, but we use that sort of experience that we got to be able to ask them the questions and get additional information and make sure that the business plans actually stacked up. Obviously, you know, that's fairly straightforward. And, you know, from there, how we selected the tenant. The lease, as I said, was for 5 years. And as part of that, which is something that I don't think they normally have in leases, but working with our project team, we had a guy on there from asset management, Andy Gledhill, and he came up with the idea that we would have an operational requirement, and that had a series of about 26 items which would tell the operator how we wanted them to run the business and requirements of them, you know, as part of the lease. That just gave us a further element, I suppose, of control, rather than just, you know, giving somebody a lease and going, right, off you go. I mean, that involved things like regular meetings, you know, they have to let us know about any staffing changes, visits, things like that, you know, media. If media get in touch with the shop, they need to get in touch with us. So it's all managed, you know, professionally, and for them to make sure that they behave in a professional manner and that they meet all the health and safety requirements. Just to make sure it was like a mini Marks and Spencers, really. You know, we didn't want it to be some, you know, Steptoe and Son junkyard on one of our sites. We wanted it to be to a high standard, and it is, you know, and you know, the fact that it's still going and it's still so successful, which, you know, Louise will qualify, is, you know, a testament to that. So we have now got 2 shops. Shop construction costs included were included within the budget for the away site redevelopment. So the first one, obviously, we did at Seacroft. We did another one at Kirkstall, and again, that was a slightly bigger build and obviously more expensive. The shop's roughly the same size, but it cost us a lot more because of some of the ground conditions on the site were unfavourable, and we had a lot of piling work to do, so that it was much more expensive. But again, we were lucky in that we had that money in there within that capital programme to do it, and because we'd already done the shop at Seacroft, it was a no-brainer doing one at Kirkstall. Members are on board again, they can see, you know, the success of East Leeds, and so it was quite easy to get that one through, and it was on exactly the same basis. Both projects have given us, we'd normally be looking for capital payback within about 25 years, but we worked out, you know, from what we were going to get lease wise, that we were going to recoup that within at least 17 or 18 years. So it's just been just a massive success story, and you know, as I say, these 2 shops now are they've even recovered from COVID, which, you know, Louise will tell you was, you know, a terrible shock when we had to close down completely when the House Away sites closed down, but they're back open again now, and Kirkstall has absolutely bounced back. Yeah, so
Liz, thanks for that. That's a great overview. Great project, and we've kind of given the end of the story away, that it's been a brilliant success. But you mentioned in there, and you know, those of you listening in will realise actually this is a huge project, and to engage the third sector, charity sector, social enterprise. You were looking for a very professional standard. You were looking for a professional response. This is where, Louise, you come in. Could you say something about how you approach from Revive Leeds? You could perhaps just say a little bit about the origins and how you responded to the challenge and what the benefits have been involved in the project.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as Liz said, they're the council, we're the money makers. So it was time when we won the contracts in order to for them to sit back and us to sort of coin in the money. So I was just doing a basic calculation. Last year, the council actually took from Revive 128,000. So based on the 625,000, I think it cost, it actually should recoup within 6.5 years. Certainly not the 18. But anyway, go back to a little bit of history for Revive Leeds. It was interesting because it was actually a setup between 3 organisations, not just one organisation. It was 3 charities came together. We had the partnership, which is Liz has mentioned, called the Leeds Furniture Reuse Group, and that was made up of 7 reuse organisations in Leeds back in the day. And 3 charities within that came together to form an independent CIC, Community Interest Company, and bid for the contract, which we successfully won. It took how many years for the council to build it, etc., and go through all the hoops and everything and get everybody on board. But we only had less than a year in order from the date that we won the contract in order to get in and start trading. So we were in on August 2012. We opened on a bank holiday Monday, which was wonderful. And we were absolutely floored by the public retail response from day one. So it was definitely something that we weren't disappointed in. So do I move on these slides or do you? I do it. There we go. So we had this wonderful success at Seacroft, which is the one that you've seen so far in the pictures. And that's what we call a destination store. And when we tendered for the second shop, which is at Kirkstall, we knew it was going to be a completely different animal because it's based on right adjacent to a retail site where we have Aldi and a lot of other big units down there. So we just knew it was going to be different. So we had some major challenges. We are retailers. We're not, whilst we have 3, or we had 3 charities, we now have 2 charities supporting us. We were set up as a retail organisation. So that's our expertise. The people that we employ are people who understand retail. It's not around being a charity shop in any shape or form. It's around how to do best retail. Who's moving me on? So the impacts we have on running 2 completely different retail units is mainly staff and volunteers, because the amount of staff that we need, we currently have around 30 staff between the 2 shops because of the size and the amount of trade that comes through the door, and plus the donations. Volunteers at the Kirkstall site is something that we really struggle with because of the amount of footfall we have there and the amount of donations that come in the door. Is pretty damn hard work. Seacroft, as being a destination store, has a real nice family environment, and it works really well up there. So we decided we're going to put our eBay shop up there. So we now run an eBay shop as well from the first store. Moving on, giving you some of our nice figures. These are the nice figures. So here we go, nearly 151,000 people come through the door. And those, when we call footfall, we call people who actually buy something. So there might be 1 or 2 people that pop in, but it's very rare anybody gets out the door without buying something. I've got 710 tons of reuse, so I don't know where Liz is getting her extra 40 tons from, but that's it per year.
It could be some textile waste. I noticed that actually this morning. That could be the reason that our data team have added that in.
So right, okay, yeah, we just count on our reuse. I don't think the rags, etc. were counted in on that. So anyway, 11,167 volunteer hours and 1.3 million individual items sold, which is a heck of a lot of glasses. And turnover, we just about reached 1 million in the last financial year.
Louise, could you
Yes.
say there how many jobs I mean, you know, as well as volunteer hours, what about the jobs that you've created?
We have 30 staff.
30 staff.
Yeah.
So you've
30 staff
got
across two sites.
You've got some full-timers there, haven't you?
Well, I would say that quite a majority of it is full-time. We do have a lot of what we would call zero-hour contractors, but that's mainly because we work seasonally. So Kirkstall's within the student catchment area. So we get quite a lot of people who, when they're at university, come and work for us through the year on part-time. So we use a lot of that kind of workforce as well. So it's giving quite a lot of people, but we also have, particularly in Seacroft, we have majority of the people up there are full-time. So you've probably got 15 people up there on full-time contracts. Next, where was I? Okay, so right, social benefits. This is right. So volunteers, it's a satisfying life-enhancing activity in its own right, but for others, it's a sort of step along the way to getting paid employment and getting off benefits. Revive does always, when it has a job come up, go straight to our volunteers first to find out if anybody is ready, willing and able to step up. And we just last week took on a lady who has a disabled son who comes with her every day, and she's been volunteering for 7 days a week for the last, since we opened actually, and she's just taken on a paid job this week. So it's definitely a step up for a lot of people. It's healthier and more active people in communities. Again, her lad, who he does have learning disabilities, he comes with her. He's like a workforce for us in his own right, and the health benefits he's had has been absolutely enormous for him. It also gives people a reason to get out of bed in the morning and come. In Seacroft, they give, they did just before COVID, every day, everybody had a cooked breakfast when they arrived. There was no lunch hour as such. Everybody had this big full mashings every day. And it was all paid for by Revive, just in order to get the volunteers in and up and working.
Great.
So, affordable goods, obviously people living in poverty getting affordable items. We are not charity shop. We're not charity shop prices. We sell all clothing for £1, coats £2, children's clothing all 50p. The turnover is phenomenal, so we can keep the prices low. Obviously the community, they feel like they're just not getting rid of the rubbish. If they are going to the tip as they see it and they're getting rid of the rubbish, that's one thing. But they actually feel, because we're a charity, and I think Liz alluded to this earlier on, it's because we're a charity that people actually come to us and bring us the stuff. And they take more care, and they're definitely more responsible about handling items more carefully in order that they can be reused rather than just broken and dumped. And of course, that's good for the new carbon social value that's going to be counted from now. We're moving off tonnage apparently, and we're moving into carbon weight. So that's going to be an interesting thing. And finally, it's around, again, spending locally and the local Leeds pound. Again, Liz mentioned it earlier. We really, really want to make sure that everything that is spent within the shop goes back into the local community and to Leeds in particular. And that was very critical when we did the tender. And it's also really critical why small local charities are used as opposed to your large nationals where you might find the money is going down to London for research or whatever it is. This is all the profits literally go back into Leeds and back into the people in Leeds, which is it closes the loop of the reuse level of the waste hierarchy. And I think that's about it for the benefits. Obviously, it's the big thing is the benefits. Oh yeah, where are we going next? We're hoping to further expand into West Yorkshire. That's as Revive Leeds. However, Revive Leeds is made up of, as I say, small local charities, or one, at least particularly one, which is only dedicated to Leeds and West Yorkshire. So therefore, while we're looking outside the area, one of our member charities has national scope. So the St Vincent de Paul Society is looking to replicate Revive, and with myself, because I'm a freelance consultant for my sins. So I'm looking at how we're going to spin this off nationally with the SVP. And I think
Louise,
that's
thank
me.
you. That is so interesting, and thanks both of you for the insights you've had. Really appreciate everyone really getting involved in the chat, and thanks very much, Liz. You've been busy there. I wondered what those things were coming at me, and there were your fingers actually as you were typing the responses to the questions. But thanks. There's a few questions, and actually, in response to the poll earlier on, a number of people have just said it's about space. There's three important things for them: space, space, and space.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good question, and can I put that over to you, Liz, about your thoughts on that? Because just tell us a little bit about your thoughts on Leeds City Council and where you're thinking about going in the future.
I totally understand the space issue. The two sites that we've got shops on were old, well, there still are transfer stations, so we've got lots of space there. We've still got 6 household waste sites. They all have a reused container at them, so just a shipping container that we fill up each week, and we have different charities that collect from there weekly. So one of the things that we've been looking at is where do we go next with these 6 sites. And one thing that you might want to consider is something that Louise is also involved in for another local authority, is selling the goods off-site, maybe at a building, that maybe the council could lease to the organisation, or maybe they could, make their own arrangements with the private landlord. So, I mean, there are options on site if everybody knows about pop-up shops. I think Ipswich have done that because we had some really good information from them, but there are limitations if you can only operate your shop from a small container at the site, the number of staff that you need to do that. And one of the things that we've been exploring is there a possibility to bulk up all the materials from the sites where we don't have space to an off-site location, and maybe we have a hub there where we sell things from. So that's one of the things that we might be looking at next.
Thank you. We've got a question about upcycling, and is it straight in and out, Louise, or is there an upcycling operation where you kind of trying to add some value and also social value and training to the items?
To be fair, the amount of donations, as you saw, the amount of units that go through, the chances of actually getting time to do any upcycling are pretty slim. What we do have a tendency to do is when we're dealing with small electricals, they get a clean, they get a good test. We find a remote if there's a remote missing for a good telly. So, but that's about the limit of it. We don't actually physically do any upcycling.
Okay. We've got loads of questions. Thanks very much for you. Without any prompting, we've got loads of things we can actually talk about. It's going to take us all our time just to sort of address some of these. There's a question here about groups getting involved in the authority's bulky waste services. Is there a kind of link between the sites and bulky waste collections?
The bulky waste collections in Leeds are still operated in-house. If there's any items that they pick up, they will drop it off at one of our sites if suitable. But the groups in Leeds, there's a number of groups that make collections, isn't there, Louise?
Yeah.
And that some of them are chargeable and some of them do it on a free of charge basis. So
But the bulky waste call centre already links directly. So if somebody rings up for a bulky waste collection, they're immediately asked if it's reusable, and if it is reusable, they're diverted at that point to a charity.
Okay, thank you. Liz, can I go back to your sort of strategic plan? For those who obviously raised the question of space and having space available and having the opportunity, I'm guessing there are certain time windows that you can only do this kind of project. That both at Seacroft and Kirkstall, you were actually doing a site improvement program. Could you just talk over about kind of how you fitted into the program and how important that is?
How we fitted the building to the
I mean, there are critical points when people from other authorities ought to be kind of thinking about, I suppose is my point. Could you say something about the critical moments, and because it's not actually 6 months before you go live with something, you actually need to be in.
We did it at the pre-planning stage when we were, sitting down initially with our design team and architects, and they will come to you and say, right, what do you want? And we said, well, we want a waste transfer station. It needs to do this, this, and this, and also we want a household waste site with X number of bays, and we also want a shop, and this is the size of it. We need the shop to be at Kirkstall. We wanted it to be at the curbside opposite the local Aldi, so it is literally a high street shop. We're very lucky there that we've actually, it just looks like a shop, opposite McDonald's and next door to Aldi. And that was one of the prerequisites for the use of the land at Kirkstall. We had to have the shop next to the pavement so people could just walk in off the street. They weren't travelling over the waste site. It can operate whether the waste site is open or not. And it was all planned in from a very early stage, what our requirements were, and then it just goes through the normal development process where plans are drawn up, and then we obviously go out to tender. I think in both cases we had to split off the cost of the build with the shop and without the shop. So in case the funding was questionable, and we might have to pull it out and just go with a program without a shop, but luckily we got it through in both cases.
Excellent, thank you. Louise, any thoughts on advice to authorities listening in, joining us today on going about this sort of project, and something particularly in view of, I suppose, your expertise? How should people work with the third sector? How should they engage with them?
The easiest thing to do is to find out if you have a local reuse partnership. I work with a national organisation called the Reuse Network, and they have hundreds of members all over the UK. And within that, if it's quite cheap actually, it's only £300 to buy in for the weights protocol, which will give any local authority the ability to record and monitor weights nationally. So it's not just like somebody's saying, oh yes, well an iron weighs that much. It's like it is proper protocol weights. So definitely get in contact with the National Reuse Network, and they'll be able to put you towards the organisations in your area. Alternatively, come and see me. As I say, we're going to be working nationally with the St Vincent de Paul Society, so we will be able to look at helping you, or possibly definitely tendering for any reuse shops that you'd be thinking of putting on your sites.
Liz, any last thoughts, encouragement to people to whether to go for it or not?
Well, come and see us. Come and visit if you can. Ask us any questions. That's absolutely not a problem. We've got lots of best practice. Warwick shared it with us initially, and we're happy to do that now. And if you need some of the information to back up your business cases, if you're putting forward proposals for funding and things like that, again, happy to share with you if that's helpful.
Great, thank you. We'll make this recording available. We'll be sending it around. We'll be sending the slides around. Liz and Louise's details will be included in that package, so please do get in touch with them. Just final thoughts to sum up. We hope we've answered your concerns. We mentioned the 3 issues of risk, lack of funding, and lack of case studies. We hope we've actually addressed those 3. And for me, looking on this project, it seems like a no-brainer. And if I was still back in local authority, it'd be one of those things that I'd want to really do. So just to sum up, we've got a project here that diverts waste from landfill. It provides the right environmental message to people using the waste sites. Financially, we've seen that it covers its costs and more, and it fulfills social value. Our encouragement would be to actually get involved in the project, and please do let us know if you do that, and whether this webinar has been helpful in actually being a bit of a catalyst in making that happen. Would you believe we've had an hour and it's flown by? But can I thank you very much, Liz and Louise, for your time. Particularly, can I thank you for being so open and sharing your knowledge so freely. So I really appreciate that. Thank you to all of you for joining, and we look forward to seeing you again, speaking to you again in the near future. So thanks very much for joining us. Cheerio. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.